Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland.
Vigeland, close.
Emma V on the Majority Report. Joining us now, the reporter and co-founder of Drop Site News, co-host of Counterpoints, Ryan Grimm. Ryan, always a pleasure.
Indeed, always good to be here.
We're going to talk about your little screed on DEI on X when we get around to there, because we've got a lot to talk about. Also, I just wanted to also say, congratulations on what you guys are doing over at Drop Site.
Yeah.
I know you're doing this thing with The Guardian and the 972 mag, and you've got a couple other sort of like joint reporting projects with other outlets. Just briefly, give me the 1 minute recap on that.
Well, yeah, the one we did with The Guardian and 972, which is an Israeli investigative news outlet. They're the ones that originally broke the Lavender scandal. If you remember this, Lavender is this IDF program that was using AI to come up with lists of targets and then basically pulling the trigger. And the program was called Where's Daddy? Because in contravention of all decency and international, human rights law, what they were doing is they were waiting for Hamas members or people that AI identified as Hamas members to come home to their buildings and then striking their buildings. And they had massively expanded the number of innocent people that they said were okay to kill in order to kill that guy. And they also massively reduced the rank. So it used to be, if you were going to kill 20 civilians to kill one guy, it had to be a very top ranking person. Now, the US won't do that. The US will not even take out a high value target if there are civilians around. We do it. We're not supposed to do it, but our rules of engagement are we do not do that. Israel's rules of engagement are they do that. It used to be for high ranking people. What they did after October 7th is they said anybody who's affiliated with Hamas can now be taken out, and it doesn't matter how many civilians around them, as long as it's like under 20. And if you go through the lists of the casualties that the Ministry of Health puts out, you'll see that there are an awful lot of people in Gaza with the same names, like because people haven't been able to really leave Gaza, for many decades. You have the same, Al-Masri will be page after page after page after page of those killed. And you often have people named after their father or their mother or their grandmothers. So you will get enormous numbers of people that have basically the same name. To let AI then determine, who is Hamas at what address and then attack that building. So just to me, the biggest scandal so far of the AI era, and 972 broke that story.
It's both scandalous, even if they're, at the risk of minimizing this and not the intent, but we see this in the context of purging voter rolls.
Right.
That type of stuff. It's the same sort of programmatically, except for the difference is these people are targeted for killing and under diminished threshold for what constitutes a legitimate killing of these people, and as a deliberate policy. So, this would be a good question next time you're in with the Defense Department. If Israel's the most moral army in the world, that must mean that we're almost our military is almost angelic. For us, we got to be that much more moral if it's not even our policy.
Right. And to finish your question, so we at DropSite got a ton of documents, from Israeli Ministry of Defense and Microsoft that showed the contracts that were cut between Microsoft and the Israeli Ministry of Defense that showed an explosion of kind of use of cloud and other services from Microsoft after October 7th. We don't know if Microsoft was specifically powering Lavender, but we did report with The Guardian and 972 that Microsoft is one of the biggest customers, or I guess Israel's one of the biggest customers for Microsoft, and we brought in 972 because they had done that that previous reporting. So that was kind of the first kind of big partnership we've done, but we all did our own stories. It's sort of like these mainstream outlets are still like, you do your own story. We'll take the documents, but you guys do your own story, which is fine. Like that's kind of
my understanding was like that's sort of like what the way that 972 and The Guardian and Local Call, I think it was, that Marone Rappaport, I think we interviewed him about
Local
that.
Call was involved too.
They all sort of like handled one silo of a similar story and used some of the same source material and maybe did some of the analysis.
It's a good model. Yeah. We did that with this expose on this news organization that was involved with like Panama Papers and Paradise Papers. We teamed up with a whole bunch of outlets in Europe and revealed that, in fact, they're about roughly 50% funded by State Department, which is which is information that should be that should be kind of shared willingly with readers, and that kicked off a big scandal in Europe. Although now it's kind of been washed over by Trump just gutting USAID totally. Like that's where a lot of the money was coming from. So now it's like, oh, they're not going in with a scalpel and going after different programs. They're just coming with a sledgehammer and hitting everything.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, I wanted to talk about the AI stuff and what it told us about Lena Khan and the danger of monopolies, but that seems like it's slid down the list right now in terms of next time around. People should keep in mind the implications of monopolies, on just simply the development of and how easy it is to sort of like get how atrophied it can make, businesses. Right. But I mean, the story with the AI, in my mind, is really just more about like, how can we inflate the value of these assets? Exactly. Mm-hmm. The way we inflate the value of these assets is to pretend like it cost a real lot to develop, and all of a sudden we've artificially raised the bar to entry, and just hoping that nobody else figures out that we've been playing a game. It turns out they did. But let's talk about the Empowerment Control Act. What we've seen with the Office of Personnel Management extending into the Treasury, although that seems to be almost like a separate operation on some level, because you have like on one hand, you have the Doge stuff, which is now, I guess, an official government entity. They sort of swapped it out with the digital entity. It's unclear to me, like, what authority they have, but let's start with this Treasury story, because this, I think, what are they doing?
It looks like Elon Musk and his allies were sitting around. They're like, how does the money actually go, from Congress, to the executive, and then wind up having been spent? Like, what are the precise mechanisms for that? And then eventually it goes through Treasury. And it's a very technical system, just a very technical process. Like OMB will say, okay, this is the amount of money that's going to go out. And then the Department of Energy will say, all right, here's the money we're sending out, to subsidize this nuclear power plant or whatever. And so clearly what happened is Musk's people were like, okay, what happens next? Like, who's writing the check? Like, who's pressing the buttons? What accounts are going from there to there? And they wanted intimate access inside those rooms and to watch those money flows. And as Jeff Stein at the Washington Post scooped, the guy who's been kind of there since 1989 was like, no, you guys are not coming in here. Like, think like the bureaucrats in Ghostbusters, like, get out of here. Like this, you don't come anywhere near this. You don't know what you're going to do. You don't know what you're going to unleash. Actually, it was the reverse. The bureaucrats were the bad guys in Ghostbusters. And so he's resigning in protest over this. So, what damage could Elon Musk and his crew do if they go in there and start pressing these buttons and trying to get their hands on it? We did a piece a couple months ago before the election about Elon Musk's America Inc. He, like, the name of his, he's got this group called America Inc. It's a great piece that I would suggest people go find, that predicted that what Musk really wanted was to hoover up as much data and information as possible about the very precise mechanics of how federal spending works, to basically get choke points around it. And it looks like he's heading in that direction.
Choke points? I mean,
then you're the most powerful person in the world. Like, I mean, he's already
but I mean,
at the top.
Like, this feels like I'm going into, I don't know, some mid-sized business. There's somebody sitting in an office who just literally writes the checks, put them in an envelope, and I'm going in there and I'm going like, I'm looking around and saying like, oh, so this is the printer you use? Oh, is this your email address? Oh, why don't you step out for half an hour? And
can you imagine what you could do with that? Yeah.
I mean, this just seems like there's the idea that there's efficiencies to be made in that office seems so small bore. Like, you know, somebody's been there for 35 years. They've got it down, right? Like, I mean, we've got it down. I'm sure there's...
The checks are going out. Like, say what you want about the government.
We don't hear of like somebody saying, you know, to the extent the checks aren't going out, it's a function of what of basically what the administration just did.
Yeah.
But there's the amount of dollars associated with the efficiency. Like, you know, I checked around here and you're paying $2.99 for these things. I can get them for you for $2.85. Like, there's just not margins here. The only reason why you would want access to that is if you wanted to purposely fuck up the process, the sort of like rubber meeting the road process of the government. And you know, like, the Russell Vought stuff is sort of like one level up of like, we're going to screw with the engine, we're going to screw with the fuel injection, we're going to mess with the brakes. But this is like literally, you know, tires on the road.
And also, this guy's wealth depends on federal contracting. It's truly incredible. It's not just ideological or political. Like, his entire commercial enterprise is reliant on federal contracts to SpaceX, across the board, and aside from all the investments he's got in China. And so what is, imagine you're like competing against him as a federal contractor now. Like, you're also bidding for these different services. This guy's not just in the Oval Office, he's in the bowels of the Treasury Department.
He's the deep state. You could do what Boeing is apparently doing and work with Elon Musk to manufacture your next fighter jet. That's what the reporting has been. And when we talk about government waste, there is literally no part of our government that is more wasteful than the Pentagon, which has failed audit after audit. But you know who's not going to be subjected to all these cuts? The part of the government that may be giving out contracts to Elon Musk as he helps Boeing manufacture their fighter jets, for the anti-war administration.
Yeah, going after the Pentagon budget would mean less money for the contracts in the pool that he pulls from. Maybe.
Let's talk about, I almost feel like we are like still 2 or 3 steps away from the traditional Republican, we're going to cut WIC, we're going to cut SNAP, we're going to cut this for tax cuts. We're just in the mode right now of, we've gone from the beginning of the week, we're going to basically make the government dysfunctional on an administrative level. Steve Bannon said in, whatever it was, March of 2017 at the CPAC, that's our goal. Destroy the administrative state. And they just started their process of carrying that out. But this is like, the check writing thing is not even like demoralizing the agencies, have the agencies be ineffective, have people not like government that way or whatever. This is literally, for all we know, the guy could be in there going like, we've done an analysis on this and all we need to do is change one digit And our checks will start adding like 32 cents per check or something like this. I mean, who knows what they're doing in there, it seems to me.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the beginning of the week. Russell Vought's sort of plan to traumatize federal workers. Do you even have a sense of where we stand now with this? Because my sense is they don't really, at the end of the day, care. Mm-hmm. Like whether this was part of their whole plan that they would rescind and not rescind, or the chaos. I'm just using like the metaphor of, you got a sledgehammer, dude's been hired to go in and do demo, comes back and he's like, I think I might have hit something that was structural. And you're just like, I don't care. We want to take the whole building down eventually anyways.
Right. Yeah. And what I've been hearing from people who are, who are career, officials who've been interacting with Trump's folks, is that there is a huge difference in tone between 2017 and now. 2017, they were surprised to win. They had the same radical kind of revolutionary attitudes. Russ Vought was part of the original Trump operation and was at OMB. But there was a much more, let's figure this out. Let's do this together. Like we need these federal workers to be on our side and to implement the policies that we want to get done. And it was generally speaking pretty collegial. There's now become this like embedded idea based in certainly a significant amount of reality among some workers that the workers were subverting the Trump administration, and there were a bunch that were that publicly said that they intended to do that, and so this time the tone has been just blunt and rude and aggressive, and lots of screaming and yelling, and you're going to do this, and there's an underlying sense that all of this is feeding into the idea that they want them to leave, that they're trying to get people to quit. That's of course backed up by that Elon Musk email that he sent to every federal worker, fork in the road, saying everybody needs to come back to the office, which, by the way, is not even possible for lots of offices. Like, so over the years, they have, to save money, they've shut down a significant number of offices. So where people were kind of would telework, 3 days a week, and there'd be enough kind of communal workspace for everybody. If you spread it out, bringing everybody into the office at the same time, you won't have, like a lot of places, you won't even have room for people. But setting that aside, Musk did this thing where he said, if you resign right now, you'll still get paid through September and you won't have to come in. But if you don't, you have to start coming in immediately. Most workers are not coming in immediately because they have unions and there are contracts, and Musk can't override a contract, just with like an all staff email. But clearly the design here is to just create chaos and misery and get enough people to just quit, so that if it's a position that they feel like they need filled, they backfill it with somebody from their Project 2025 resume list. And if they don't need it filled, then they just leave it empty.
I mean, this is like, and we were around during this. This feels like the CPA, the Coalition Provisional Authority,
right.
Heritage Foundation, except for the difference is that they thought we're going to be creating a Milton Friedman paradise in Iraq. And here again, they have a very simple agenda. I mean, when you do a blanket buyout, essentially, which is what they're offering for anybody in the federal government, there's no strategic downsizing here. There's no like, we're only keeping the most efficient and important people. You're just basically blanket. If we get people out of the federal government, mission accomplished. It doesn't matter who it is. And so this is clearly just, we're taking a wrecking ball. There's no surgical, stuff here. There's no plan to make the government more efficient. There's only a plan to make it, to destroy it, really, it seems like.
Yeah, because then then you have to privatize the things that you actually do need to get done. Like, oh, wow, look at this. The government can't really function anymore. Checks aren't even going out.
Right.
People are angry. Well, let's get
that's why he's going in there. Because he wants to set up a system that will do what the American government does in terms of issuing checks. and destroy ultimately the government's ability to do it. And then all of a sudden his business is right there, and then bingo.
I mean, what was his original money that he made at PayPal? And what did they figure out? If you sit in the middle of streams of money flows with your cup out, just pouring it into your bucket constantly, you will become a billionaire and one of the richest people in the world. So yeah, if you can get a private PayPal in there and just sit there and put just like an office space, you put a little, just take a few pennies on every transaction. They've seen what a few pennies through kind of controlling all the private flows of money can do. If you can get yourself in the middle of the public flows of money, then the sky's the limit.
It feels like Musk is really taking the Javier Milei model to heart for the United States government. Basically, an anarcho-capitalist vision, gut the administrative state, put the country through a series of shocks, to borrow from the great Naomi Klein. And that creates opportunity for guys like Musk, but there really is no one like him at the end of the day, because he's the wealthiest guy on the planet. As he goes to speak at a rally in Germany for a far-right party that most of the mainstream parties in Germany is barred from working with because they engage in light Holocaust denial, even though for the most part that's illegal in Germany. And he gives a speech there. He's feeling himself. He's expanding these ideas globally. Like, he's trying to interfere in the UK elections and now in Germany. And then you have the right-wing party in Germany basically starting to echo the AfD's rhetoric on immigration because they're so scared of Musk coming in and funding them, and then they become obsolete. He's trying to do this all across the world. Yeah,
I'm starting to wonder if Elon Musk is a more dangerous figure than Donald Trump even, which I didn't think was possible beforehand. But he seemed like Trump, not only is he term limited, never really seemed to have exactly a vision. He had
his vision is he's just going to put some cash in his pocket, and if there's something going around, he's going to get a taste, and he's making money. He doesn't care.
No, I think he's genuinely a bit of like when Trump talks about IQ and DEI. I'm sorry, Ryan, you were responding, but like there's some race science here. And Elon Musk has dabbled in this for quite a while. I think people.
JD Vance was talking about IQ on Twitter the other day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like with the DEI, we want the highest IQ, smartest people. They are dipping their toe into race science. And Elon Musk, I think is one of his few genuine beliefs.
Right. And I think the Milei stuff is a genuine belief too. And I think it probably flows out of his he was raised in South Africa. Like I think he is hostile to democracy. Like I think he thinks he's more in that Yarvin camp, and that's what our America Inc. story was about, which is like one of the Yarvin ideas is that a corporation should actually, basically be in charge of governing a country. People can have shares in that company, and if they don't like that, then they can sell their shares and move somewhere else. Like I feel like that's closer to what he believes.
Will this company have a monopoly of force?
Give me America Inc.
Yeah, I mean,
it might if it becomes the main contractor for the Pentagon.
What? I mean, the only sort of like, in contemplating like how the brakes get put on, now I know Chuck Schumer's out there saying that people are getting are climaxing or aroused or whatever it is, and he's very happy about this. It seems to me that it's going to take a little bit more than Chuck Schumer sort of like watching all this with backwards binoculars, essentially, as if he's like 75 miles away from where it's all happening, and the courts. I guess it remains to be seen. It seems to me that part of what they're doing by the memo, rescinding the memo, them being unclear, is making it that much more difficult to actually find somebody who has standing, and it being a live question at any given point. I mean, because they could theoretically Okay, it gets to the, this court and they go, oh, we've rescinded it. All right, well, that court says it's not an issue anymore. And then the next day, we started it up again in just a different form. And then they could do this. Like, how long does it take? 3-4 months of this? And I mean, I'm like 36 hours away from quitting this job. Never mind, like if I was working, if you're in the federal government and you're just like, 4 years of this, forget about it. Like this is, somebody was just telling me they did, there were studies with mice that they did that, like if you put them in a bucket of water and, every 15 seconds somebody comes in and lifts them up, they can actually survive swimming in that water after that for a long period of time. But if nobody comes after, a couple of certain amounts, they all end up drowning because they just think this is going to go on forever. I mean, what's to keep this from being effective? Like what are the options on the table?
But also there was reporting in the kind of development, international development trade press today that by this weekend or early next week, there will be about 2,000 to 3,000 layoffs in Washington, D.C. at these, organizations that do work in the foreign aid space. So like you can't, when you freeze funding, you have payroll to make, people have bills to pay, you got commercial real estate mortgages to pay, and if you freeze that, you have to start furloughing people, and so it's effective immediately, in that sense. There's a lot of talk that they want to have a court challenge to the Impoundment Control Act, but like you said, as it moves through the courts, they kind of back off of it and make it moot. I think they're looking for a challenge where they're more likely to win. Whereas when they look at this one, they're like, okay, all right, we blew up Medicaid accidentally, maybe accidentally. We blew up Medicaid. We're going to lose if we go to court on that. So let's back off and let's try a different approach. I think they're going to keep trying until they get one where the Supreme Court will say, yeah, that spending is within the executive branch's authority, and the Impoundment Control Act doesn't apply there. And they'll have this tiny, tiny little carve out within it. And then they will put everything right through that loophole and just expand it until the Impoundment Control Act is basically declared moot by the Supreme Court. And then you don't have Congress anymore. Then it's just the executive.
What are you hearing anybody in Washington, inside or outside of, elected leaders or, NGOs or advocacy groups? Like, there was a time when the Harris campaign was talking about Project 2025. This is at the heart of it, right? Like this is all like the Schedule F and the whole thing, the attack on the administrative state. I mean, we were doing shows on this 6 to 8 months ago. Surely somebody thought like, hey, there's a 25% chance of this happening. Maybe we should just come up with a plan. Anybody? Have you bumped into anybody who's like, yeah, here's what we're doing. We have now engaged Operation, anti-Russell vote or whatever it is, or, no vote or whatever, something clever, something like that. Save our government.
No, the attorneys general are suing. So the blue states are suing, but no, there doesn't seem to be anything, highly sophisticated. Not controlling either chamber of Congress hurts. Not controlling the Supreme Court hurts. They're pretty routed right now.
Well, Hakeem Jeffries tells me that God's going to be sitting on the throne either way.
That's true.
So as long as God's there, I'm sure that'll work out. Let's talk about this DEI stuff, because from my perspective, the whole DEI, and it's really technically DEIA, right? And that came up. The A is accessibility. And that came up. When we talking about Biden's executive order, what was it, 308 or something, that instituted these programs, it was also about accessibility. in these offices, and certainly Trump read that off from the podium as to what could be problematic about the FAA. You know, they're hiring dwarves, and literally he said this.
Yeah.
But what was your beef with this? My understanding is that you liked a tweet from Christopher Rufo, and
I missed this scandal.
Yep. Well, I just got it from the IMs.
Yeah, the thing that really pissed people off is that I said that Rufo did people a favor. Now, Rufo is not trying to do anybody a favor here. Rufo has a reactionary agenda that is going to try to take opposition to DEI as it has been constituted and expand that to an entire war on civil rights and the entire kind of welfare state, the civil society that progressives have built up since the New Deal. Like that's what they're trying to do. But DEI as it's currently constituted, to me, and this is what I said on Twitter that got people really angry, is that it is an active impediment to building a multiracial working class. And the reason multiracial working class movement, the reason that it was adopted so rapidly by universities and by corporations is because they understood it as a way that they could take the momentum away from that. In particular, out of the civil rights movement, you had Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, for instance. If you had a problem at your workplace, you filed an EEOC complaint, and then the EEOC would rule on that and would order companies to remedy their structural racism. That to me is a good thing. What DEI did, and DEI did not flow out of the civil rights movement. It flowed out of the kind of woo-woo new age stuff out of the Bay Area. What corporations realized is that if they brought in these DEI consultants and built up these offices, that the EEOC and any lawsuits that were brought against the companies and other public pressure that came could then be shielded from them. Hey, we did a training. It's not us, actually, that's doing anything structurally racist here. The racism is everywhere, but most importantly, it's internalized inside of you. And you need to work through your internalized racism. And then once you do, then the problems will be solved. Until then, get out of here with your EEOC complaints and your lawsuits about racial bias. And so it became this shield that these companies and universities were using against people who were genuinely coming after them, and at the same time wasn't actually producing the kind of diversity and inclusion that it ought to.
I think that's fair.
And
within the context of essentially the corporate version of this, right? Because we did have, I guess it was executive
the university
order
version too, because universities are giant corporations and big hedge funds,
without a doubt,
that kind of have the dress up of an
but
academic institution.
as a government instrument, 1435, I guess it is 14035. This is a DEIA. It basically, among the stuff in there, was paid internships instead of non-paid internships, so that you could actually get, low-income people in there. It was stuff like, hey, I don't know, coffee should be available, so that your wheelchair can read, if you're in a wheelchair, that type of stuff. I mean, that's
right.
the problem, is that like
right.
there
and
is...
to me, the problem becomes that you lose all of the good things if you defend something that you know is indefensible, because eventually you're going to lose the indefensible thing, and then with it you lose everything else.
But why not make it clear there's a distinction between, let's say, corporate DEI policies, which are a shield from government civil rights legislation, versus government DEIA policies, which are a way to make sure that workplaces are actively making sure that they...
I agree. Yeah.
All right. So...
Yeah, that's where
you
it
can,
should be.
Do you have a blue check?
Because
if you have a blue check, you can edit that tweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with not all of Ryan's statement. I'll never hand it to Chris Rufo, but I do agree with the provocation on this, and I think it's a sensitive time because I think there are white supremacists in the White House, like Stephen Miller or whatever, and we need to take this stuff seriously. But I also think that's why we need to talk about this, because this past week, Al Sharpton did a buy-in supporting Costco for saying we're going to keep our DEI policies. That's fine, but it's in the context of tomorrow. Costco workers are trying to strike for a 3% raise on a company that had $7 billion in profits. Al Sharpton didn't mention that once. So people always say to the class folks, do both. I don't think we can do both when we're giving PR victories to corporations. And so if we're all agreed that the corporate stuff is the one that we need to nix, like, I think that's pretty easy to agree to.
I think that's fair in the sense that also it was the Robin DiAngelo mode of diversity. And it's I would say very in the corporate context, it's about shielding the company from liability more than it is about creating a more diverse workplace. And I do think that perhaps one silver lining of this is that we can get out of the more individualized view of racism that I think creates an anxiety sometimes in people that racists exploit. Like, now we're at a point where Musk is doing a Sig Heil, and we have to pretend like, or looks like he's doing it. And we have to pretend like we don't know what it's doing because they essentially say they've made racism, liberals, into personal things that folks have had to overcome. And I think there's an anxiety that creates with some people. So then they go, well, everything's racist, so I don't have to do any work whatsoever. And then when anti-racism comes in the form of an HR meeting, it becomes bureaucracy as opposed to moving us forward.
Yeah, that's the thing is, like, MLK was in Memphis for a sanitation strike. And the thing is, like, people say class reduction, and I'm sorry. We should not be asking for any commitments from corporations on any issue that are not in a union contract, because they are not worth the paper or the web hosting that they are on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my feeling is that when someone says they have a problem with DEI, you make it out that you make it clear that it's corporate ones, because in the guise of the DEI attacks, they also just rendered the EEOC completely inoperable, right? By firing, the commissioner and getting rid of the quorum. And I am okay if Christopher Rufo wants to be out there and saying we need more government mandates on corporations as to what they can and cannot do in terms of their hiring. I am down for that. Yeah. Let's set that principle down. That the free market is bullshit, and that we should have more government intrusion on their private hiring practices, because that's what they're calling for. Yeah. I'm happy to get rid of corporate whitewashing, but I do think it's problematic. It's the same thing. They did the same thing with critical race theory, and they're going to do the same thing with some other, three alphabet way. And they're smart to pick acronyms, right? Because, and to drop off the A in this. Because people don't know that directive DEIA is what it is. And, the corporations may have dropped the A because it's a little more expensive maybe to deal with accessibility issues. But there's a reason why they do this, just so that nobody knows what they're talking about. And
what I meant by Rufo did the left a favor is, first of all, I'm provocative sometimes and just poking people, as you know. But what I mean is that the left was unwilling to go after the corporate stuff. They weren't willing to say that Robin DiAngelo. There some people were, but in general, they weren't willing to say Robin DiAngelo is a grifter who is making the world kind of a worse place for this kind of stuff. And what it did, and this is the deep irony, and why I'm actually not remotely aligned with Rufo, is like a lot of the energy behind the anti-DEI stuff, the CRT stuff, is ironically white identity politics. Like, if you look at,
not ironically at all, it's exactly that. Of course,
I mean, it's ironic if you take seriously words that they speak, which nobody should. But if you look at the actual impulse, it's all about people feeling resentment that white people are not being treated fairly, which is, go ahead, do your thing, but like that's white identity politics, and just own what it is that you're doing.
Yeah,
100%. You know, we got one party where 84% of the people who vote for it are white. I mean, that's white identity politics.
And male identity.
Donald Trump didn't have to say, I'm picking only a white guy as my VP. It's understood.
Right.
It's understood.
But Ryan
that's
says male identity politics. That's also important because the D'Angelo style of anti-racism, again, this is a white woman who does a lot of expensive talk. She wrote a book about basically being anti-racist. I would wish that, I think that maybe corporations should take advice from a black person on this, but not Robin D'Angelo, but I liken it to Lean In. I liken it to the Sheryl Sandberg kind of style of like corporate workplace feminism that I'm very critical of. But I guess perhaps, Ryan, the context of, go ahead.
One final point on a moral level, a lot of the D'Angelo DEI type of stuff was objectively itself racist. Like you didn't need you didn't need a sophisticated argument about how it's going to lead to more racism. They were serious when they would say that, being, punctuality is a trait of white supremacy, or you can find all the other things like this. Like these are real things that these white people would say about black people under the guise of anti-racist, and anybody with any common sense would hear them being said and be like, okay, you're saying that's anti-racist, but I'm not a moron. That you sound like you're being racist right now. And so many people heard it that way, black, white, and brown. Like, no. You're trying to tell me up is down right now. You this white lady and this corporation are going to make an enormous amount of money telling us that being late is a part of black culture. Like that's racist. Like we should reject that like whole cloth, just for no other reason than it is objectively immoral.
Let me ask you this, because I will admit to a real lack of awareness of Robin D'Angelo stuff. I just never engaged in it. I don't have to. I don't work at a.
You'll be shocked.
Oh no, I have no doubt. But how many workers are subject to this? I'm just doing like a quick look in Pew in 2023, at least, was saying 56% think it's a good thing. Who knows how many of them actually, smaller shares of the workplace have a staff member who promotes DEI, that their workplace offers salary transparency, and 26% have resource. My sense of this, just from conversations I've had over the past couple of years, is that much of this type of D'Angelo training is focused in media companies and in, like, honestly, like it's
like nonprofits
and like places who have a larger voice within the conversation because they're engaged in the conversation more. And there's a perception that there's like it's going on and it's gone crazy. I mean, I remember having conversations with somebody who was like, I think they worked at the Times, and they're like, this is out of control. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, people are identifying themselves as J and Z. And I'm like, you're the first person I've ever heard who is like, dude, it's because it's at the Times, because they're high profile. There were, maybe it wasn't the time. It was some a media outlet. So I don't want to be held.
I don't know. I think it's a lot more widespread, or was a lot more widespread than that, including in schools and like lots of major corporations and mid-sized corporations. It just felt like this is the thing that we're doing now. But I also think that whenever Democrats or the left or the center left or whatever find themselves saying that instead of defending a particular practice or idea, they find themselves saying that it doesn't actually exist, they should take a step back and like, wait a minute, what? Like a lot of people think it exists. Let me move this cat. A lot of people think it exists. Let's defend it. if we believe it's a defensible and good thing, so you so often hear, well, that doesn't actually happen. They're blowing that out of proportion. That's kind of beside the point, because they also have $500 million that they can spend on advertising, even if they are fabricating the entire thing.
Well,
so if
I think it's
don't
really
think
more
the thing is
about
a good
how
idea, then just say it's not a good idea rather than saying it's not actually.
Well, I mean, I guess if I was to address it, I would say, like, this is a corporate thing that is happening and I don't care what corporations do. They're private entities, and I'm happy to have government have the power to dictate more specifically their hiring practices and whatnot, and if that's what you're prescribing. But this sort of amorphous DEI thing ends up, like, again, justifying getting rid of the EEOC. Again, ends up being like where Trump feels empowered to sit in front of the podium and say, well, the reason why this plane fell out of the sky was probably because, either we hired someone with any type of, a handicap, or if they were black, or they were a woman, or they were gay, or whatever it is.
But then I just want to...
Washington Times put a picture of a black man in an air traffic control tower. And then Elon Musk shared that image. It didn't even actually look like it was DCA. It didn't look like it was national. They just literally, the Washington Times, they said,
I think it was a white air traffic controller too. But like the thing,
there was a white guy and a black. It was clear like they were blaming the black guy for it.
To your point about how the Democrats don't define anything, I think that DEI has become an avatar for extreme racism emboldened by the Trump and a catch-all for that. And Kamala Harris's candidacy, where first of all, Biden undercut her from the beginning by saying, I'm going to nominate a black woman instead of just doing it.
And then going out and finding black.
So then they call her a DEI hire and a DEI candidate. People have this resentment from corporate or their management that is this bureaucracy that is not really for them. It's to protect the company from liability, and their wages are depressed. And Kamala Harris looks like a bureaucrat or talks like a bureaucrat for the most part, and they're being told she's a DEI hire. So all of this is still racist, the reaction to her, but it doesn't mean that the Democrats didn't do a horrible job of defining it in their own way. And I think that's still...
And can I just make one point on that, Emma? Is like the Democrats, my cynical reason is they like DEI stuff because it's civil rights without the class politics.
And Emma, your point is worth underlining. I hadn't quite thought about it in that way, but what elevating the corporate DEI stuff as a boogeyman allowed the right to do was to tap into all of the anger that corporate workers have for their corporate managers and bosses, and channel it as you're saying, channel it at this other thing rather than where it ought to be, and forming a union and developing a social welfare state.
Right.
Well, I think maybe we should talk about in your tweets in the future. We'll run stuff by me, and we'll have these conversations before you send them out.
I don't know how I missed this one if it was so explosive. I'm always, Sam's making fun of me. I'm sending him stuff on Twitter at 1 a.m. So
I'll send it.
Sam
to you.
will say this to Ryan.
You can't do it, Vladimir. You do it, it's going to be a bad day.
One of my favorites.
That's what's happening every time.
That's like when his dentures were real loose.
Yeah, he certainly had it. He went through a series. We didn't get a chance to talk about tariffs, but we did. I just got an IM from somebody who works in work for a metals distributor. Just got an email saying the industry is expecting tariffs coming in. The U.S. consumes 6.5 million tons of aluminum every year. 2.7 million tons of that comes from Canada. Domestic mills are expected to raise prices to what can be considered a 20-month high by tomorrow. I imagine, if he does 25%, also, you can forget about your woodworking projects because a huge percentage of our, I'm
Trump
really talking
said
about
we have plenty of wood.
Construction.
You heard him. Yeah.
Plenty of
Trump
wood.
said we don't need Canada's wood. We have plenty of wood.
Cool.
It is.
So we're good on that.
Between the what we're seeing in terms of like their attacks on migrants and the idea of Canadian wood ended jumping 25% tomorrow, you can forget building projects anywhere.
Which is such a funny idea. What are you trying to encourage there? More forests in the U.S.? Like, you put tariffs on Canadian wood, so therefore you're trying to encourage the growth of wood here in the United States.
It's the way. You're thinking of tariffs as the old way of thinking. You're thinking of it as trying to encourage an industry in this country. No. What tariffs are is a huge revenue raiser for the government. We're going to get rid of the income tax.
Duh. Yeah. William McKinley. They tried to kill him too.
McKinley, incidentally, knew that tariffs were a way to build specific industries in this country. Right, he didn't think it was
a revenue raiser. It's hilarious.
It is.
Whoever told Trump the first time that the foreign company or country pays the tariff has cursed us all for decades.
It's fascinating he can't get past this.
But it's also why he's obsessed with Greenland, because one, I think the rare earth minerals there, the 1/4 of the world's rare earth minerals, Elon Musk is like, go take Greenland. But he's also fixated on the imperialism of the McKinley era. Someone gave him a ideological, like a daddy to look up to himself.
Little Teddy Roosevelt.
A little bit of Teddy, a little bit of TR, but the McKinley thing, we need to get a McKinley historian on here to talk about this, because much of
Philippines.
Yeah,
it's like no good books on him either. I tried looking.
The Philippines exactly is what the Panama Canal, that's where he's drawing from, and he's old and he's crazy, and this is one of his few hinge points.
I think McKinley probably wanted Cuba, so maybe Trump will get that.
Let me ask you one more thing. If you are Canada or Mexico, you find that all of a sudden there's a 25% tariff on just about everything except for oil products. You start to levy your tariffs. You don't necessarily you don't want to raise prices for your own country citizens, but you want to punish specific individuals. Where do you, what industries do you target? In other words, maybe if if Thune, I don't know what comes out of Thune's home state, but maybe it's that one product that you decide to, put some pain on. Like, who are in the administration or in the House or the Senate? What industries do you have any sense of this? I mean, I know this is a question like you wouldn't know off the top of your head, but
what I would do, I'd look at Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and I'd say interns, or maybe I'd go to DeepSeek and ask DeepSeek, what are the top exporting industries from Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin into Canada?
Yep. Cheese is going to go. There's a huge cheese tariff in Canada and Mexico.
And they probably love that tasteless stuff up there.
Yep. Oh, boy. Shots fired. Wow. Ryan Grimm, reporter and co-founder at DropSite News, co-host of Counterpoints. You can find his X account at...
Don't find it. Yeah.
No.
Go to DropSite.
It's going to be... that'll end up being our programming for the next 6 weeks, is addressing all of your tweets.
Don't go there. It's a different Ryan Grimm.
All right, folks. Ryan Grimm, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.